Why do you feel technology, arts, philanthropy, and entrepreneurship represents such an important intersection in understanding today's culture?
I think a lot of that comes from personal experience, both my personal experience having been in New York, working in experiential marketing, doing events over many years, and our company's focus as well, Free DMC. So what we started to discover as we started moving more and more in the space is that there were certain commonalities and certain places where people tend to intersect. So people who were in music, whether they were DJs or artists or producers, they were often using a lot of the cutting edge technology to either produce their work or to promote their work. People who were in technology that were producing some of this material, they were maybe interested in bands, had been in bands, had a passion for music, and that those sort of intersections were happening everywhere. So it was really just through a lot of osmosis and accessing our crowd and realizing that this concept of people being one-dimensional and fitting into these silos just wasn't really the way influencer culture worked. Influencer culture worked when people moved in and out of worlds where they might have their primary world, but they were also interested in secondary and tertiary worlds. And that was where real connections were made. That's where there was a stickiness to the social fiber. So we focused on just those four spaces. Some would argue that there are others, but just to distill it down to something that's simple, it just seemed that those four buckets, you have technology, you have philanthropy, you have the arts, and you have entrepreneurs. Usually people fall into one of those four buckets somewhere along the way. Obviously entrepreneurs, there's a huge catch-all. So that can mean any number of different things, and one can make the argument musicians are entrepreneurs and artists are entrepreneurs, and so that's why we came up with that as sort of our calling card.
And you feel that you really put your stamp on understanding culture by kind of moving forward with that mission?
Influencer culture is about connecting the dots, more so than anything else. We have a 180-degree marketing theory that culture moved, like if you think of a timeline when you're looking at a history book, you know, things moved from one period to another on a straight line. Oftentimes when marketers and brand managers talk about a 360-degree plan, they're more thinking about this circular way of thinking. And what we've found is that you're talking to yourself when you do that. 360 can be thought of access points, but you're really not plugging in to the culture as it's moving from one point to another. So 360 might work if you're trying to mass market your product. But if you're really trying to integrate influencer culture, you have to understand that it's different. It's intrinsically different in every way. And the same methodologies and tools that you might use to launch during the Super Bowl is not going to be the same that you would use to access an influencer, an indigenous influencer culture, whether that's in New York or Miami and LA, San Francisco, London, wherever, or even smaller points in between.